All right. Well, first of all, I want to welcome everybody back. As most of you know, we've had a bit of a hiatus on the project and are excited to be back. Um, I'm hearing some feedback. So if you're not on mute, please do, but feel free to come off of mute at any time. Today we're going to do a little bit of a welcome, then we'll get some NSGIC updates just to tell you where we are with the project. Then we'll get some USGS updates, and then we'll have some state updates. So glad to have that. For those of you that are new to the project, my name is Linda Wayne. I'm the project manager for NSGIC. With us from USGS are Sue Buto and Steve Achel. They are the USGS hydrography and 3D NTM and everything else managers and our partners on this project. And also, I'd like you to know Dennis Peterson. He serves as the NSGIC 3DHP liaison to the federal 3D NTM working group. So Dennis is your point of contact for getting to that group. Oh, I have to go back one point. While you guys were working this winter, I took a trip. I went on vacation to New Zealand. So through this slide presentation, I'm sharing all my photos. You have to look at my vacation photos. So that's where these pictures are coming from. First of all, welcome back. Again, I just wanted to go over some basic parameters. This is a cooperative agreement between NSGIC and USGS. The objective here is to enlist stakeholders in the derivation of 3D hydrography data to enhance the consistency of the data and conformance to USGS standards, and just in general to expand the utility of a national hydrography data product. So that's the intent. How are we doing that? Well, we want to increase 3DHP knowledge using outreach and dialogue. We want to support statewide 3DHP planning and implementation via guidance and education. And we want to engage stakeholders in developing strategies, best practices, and resources that help support that management quality and the application of the data. So who are we? Well, project management is through National States Geographic Information Council. Sorry about that. And then again, USGS is our project partner. And then you as the interest group members, you are the stakeholders, and that's who's in here. And I thought it'd be interesting if we took a quick look at who's in this interest group right now. We have Canada, that's our other nation. We have one regional government. We have four individuals, and you know them and love them. They're retirees who just love this project so much. We have five NGOs, five federal agencies, seven universities, that surprised me, 19 businesses, and 31 states. And we are going to work on those states this year. We're going to get that number up. I should also say, feel free to jump in, chat. Oh, Greg Cox was born and raised in New Zealand. I want to talk to you. Just saw that in the chat. So we've been working with USGS to come up with a work plan. Now, this is a general work plan. So we have a general framework, and then you all tell us how we achieve these things. So this group is going to be, the group that kind of directs all of this. First of all, there's a big component, as I mentioned, is communications and outreach. And we're going to do that through our leadership briefings, our newsletters, conference presentations, posting information to the NSGIC knowledge base, such as this presentation. This will be posted to the knowledge base. And of course, the 3DHP for the Nation Info Hub. All right, stakeholder engagement. This meeting, and this is a little confusing, stay with me here. In an effort to simplify things and reduce your number of meetings, we have aligned with two affiliate communities to make sure that we're not stepping on top of each other. And more importantly, to have a consistent meeting date. So the fourth Tuesday of each month, there is either going to be this meeting, a 3DHP FTN interest group meeting, and those are the months that we have there, a NSGIC state hydrography community, and those are the state hydrography stewards, or a USGS hydrography community call. And they're all on the fourth Tuesday of the month, and they're all at 1 p.m. So you can just mark your calendar. I would suggest you set them up as 3 different recurring events. I'll slip this information into the chat. And while I do that, Josh, are you on? Is Josh Greenberg?
I'm here.
All right, you want to talk about Esri while I do this?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. My name's Josh Greenberg. I'm the hydrography steward for Washington State, and Jane Schaefer Kramer, the steward for California, and I, for the last 3 years, have been hosting a lunchtime steward meeting during the UC, and we're doing that again. We have not got final permission to have food included, but our plan is to have food included thanks to our sponsors of NV5, Sanborn, Dewberry, Woolper, and NSGIC. So they will help provide food. I will put the details into the chat
I beat
because
you
we
to
do
it.
we do ask that you register so we make sure we have enough food for everyone. So it'll be Tuesday, July 14th from 11:30 to 12:30. This is a time for stewards to give updates on what they're doing and then try and just get to know each other face to face. Thanks, Linda.
And I see there's a question will be online. This will not be, this is an in-person meeting only, correct?
In person only, yes. It's in the round. It's hard to make it something that's online.
Josh, if you want to throw those sponsors in the chat, that would be great.
Okay, I can do that too.
Okay. Yes, and we will bring updates to this group. And we've actually scheduled the state hydrography community for August so that they can bring their updates to that community in August. Also, if you are not a member of any of these groups, please use these links. Two of them are my NSGIC communities, and if you need assistance with that, you can reach out to me separately. The third is the USGS hydrography community. And what you do is you register with them, and then you'll get direct notifications, and that's how you get your call-in information. So again, if you're interested in the USGS hydrography community, please go to this website, register for the calls, and they will send you the call-in information directly. I know that was a bit much. Um, any questions about how the odd schedule or the good schedule? All right. Well, I hope this helps everybody out so that we're not, again, we wanted to make sure that we weren't stepping on top of each other. All right. What else? This is still talking about the work plan. We continue to support 3DHP planning and implementation. We'll discuss through discussion, address planning and implementation issues, and maintain the 3D NTM planning guide. If you're not familiar with that, please reach out, or I can put a link in the chat if you don't know where that is. But you can get it at the 3DHP or the 3DEP for the Nation Hub. We really want to promote the use of 3DHP data and applications. And this is something that's going to be, at this point, we're seeing this as kind of a primary activity this year. We want to facilitate the coordination and promotion of 3DHP education and application resources. I'm going to, so they switched up Zoom while I was gone. And right now, my folks are not in alphabetical order. So Dennis, are you on the call?
Yes, I'm here.
Do you want to talk about this, your thoughts on what you wanted to do with regards to sort of leveraging and setting up our education application? Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm gonna put you on the spot in a few minutes, okay?
Okay.
That was just a heads up.
All right.
And then our last portion of the work plan is program development and data development feedback to USGS. And so USGS has been really, great about coming to us and saying, what are your issues? What's working? What's not working? They've been very responsive to those things. I know a lot of you were happy to see the NHD data kind of hard-coded in there until we had 3DHP data. So that's also part of this, is that dialogue and that feedback. So we set out a call for topics. I hope you saw it. If you didn't, sorry. These are the responses we got. And this is where I'm going to call on you, Dennis. There were several folks had wanted to talk about USGS data development methods, like how are we synchronizing different vintage resolution LiDAR collection? How do we producing seamless DEMs where data is redacted? And how can we, what thoughts are there on aligning 3DEP and 3DHP data production for efficiency? Like are there opportunities there? And I'm going to ask anybody that had comments on these. We'll go down the first page and then we'll ask anybody that had comments to elaborate on these. Then there are the state data development methods. And that would be how are states incorporating 3DHP into their existing hydrography and related products? Like how are you bringing your culverts in or coordinating with that? And this was a specific question on enhancing unreliable data resources such as stormwater. What do you do when you've got the best you have, but it's not something reliable? So I think there's some discussion around that. Questions about integrating related data resources, wetlands, estuaries. I know there's a lot of interest in inland bathymetry. And then the WBD, the catchments and the drainage areas. How are we going to work these products together? And then, of course, applications and tools. There is the Esri Arc Hydro tool. I know a lot of folks use that. And then USGS is maintaining, how do we do data maintenance using something like the USGS markup application or some other application? Before I go on to the next page, I'll ask anybody that submitted any of these comments want to elaborate on them or I know you guys are here and you want to hear somebody other than me talk. All right. We'll carry on. There were questions about tribal notification process and protocols. What is the USGS protocol for tribal objections to data collection and the state role in tribal outreach engagement? What can the state do in a constructive manner? So if you're not aware, there is USGS is working with NSGIC to present the tribal notification process. There'll be a webinar Tuesday, June 9th at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern. I will put that information in the chat as well. And I think USGS can answer any questions you may have about that. We had the questions that were submitted, and Jane, I believe you're the one that submitted some questions on this. Those have been forwarded to Cindy Thatcher with USGS, so we've given those to her in advance, so she knows what things you had interest in.
Right. Yeah. Thanks a lot for that. So, I just want to point out there, in addition to the Tuesday, June 9th, webinar that I believe NSGIC is hosting, which is
Correct.
great. Yeah. USGS, maybe that's going to come up. They're going to host webinars with the tribes as the audience, and I believe the first one is tomorrow. So I'm planning on attending that one as well. So thank you for this.
Okay, Sue, Steve, you have any information about that? Is that something that is intended for the tribes? I mean, is it something we should promote to this community or maybe not?
Yeah, hi, Linda. Yeah, that webinar really is intended for tribal members to discuss the recent tribal notification letter that went out. We do those sort of big national notifications periodically. So those webinars are specifically really for tribal members to attend and ask questions. And as noted, Cindy Thatcher will be presenting to this larger NSGIC community on the 9th.
That sounds good. Okay. The next subject, Dennis, you ready? Is training and education, 3DHP related, to educate and inform stakeholders in the application of 3DHP data and to coordinate and leverage the development and training and education resources. So Dennis is the one that suggested this as a work plan item this year. So I'll ask him to sort of elaborate on what he's thinking.
Sure. Thanks, Linda. Good afternoon, everyone. So we had a history of with the LiDAR efforts in 3D, the 3D elevation program, of realizing that the worst thing that we could do was spend millions of dollars on data development, but not provide a mechanism or a venue or a format, if you will, for our stakeholders and our GIS community across Tennessee, to help them understand what is LiDAR elevation data and how can they leverage it in their particular use cases or daily activities. And so we had a lot of success developing that training program and education and outreach for LiDAR. We want to replicate that at a certain level for hydrography and 3DHP. Again, we're fortunate that we have some state agency funding partners to help fund the development of 3DHP in Tennessee. But again, we want to make sure that we're maximizing the investment that we're making into the program. And so I actually have one of my staff on the call here today, Suzanne White. She is my technical lead for 3DHP. Some of you know Paul Dudley on my team and a lot of the work that he did with LiDAR and the training program. Well, Suzanne's going to be my technical lead on the Tennessee 3DHP training and education efforts. And we've started, we've just had some initial discussions about developing a training advisory group within our state to help craft the content and materials and structure of how our program is going to be developed. But obviously there's overlap, and we want to be able to leverage the work that Linda is doing here as well for I guess it's a two-way street, right? Things that we develop for Tennessee, we can share with other states. And through this this forum that Linda is leading, you know, there may be other states that we can learn from and incorporate information. So very excited about this. And I think that, you know, again, it's all about how do we maximize the investment that we've made into the data, and find as many stakeholders and you know, GIS users across the country, not just Tennessee, to really to see where the new 3DHP data model and some of the unique things about the data model and how it differs from NHD, how we can promote and maximize, again, the use of these wonderful data products coming from USGS.
So let's talk about this as a group a little bit. How do you see that working? Are we talking about doing some sort of initial inventory? Who's got something? Maybe in a subgroup, a work group that would like to sort of get the ball rolling? Or I hate to do another survey 1, 2, 3, but that may be, you know, how we start the ball rolling.
Yeah, good question. I'll be honest, I'm not a hydrography expert. I'm not a hydrography steward. I lean on Suzanne for a lot of the technical elements of 3DHP, but Suzanne, I'm not sure if you have thoughts that you want to share, if you want to come off mute.
Hello. Thanks, Dennis, and thanks, Linda. Yeah, I've thought about this for a while now, and have been putting together an education advisory board of different subject matter experts, and they may be in academia, they may be in the private sector, There's state representatives in there too from our different state agencies. And what I was expecting is to work with those subject matter experts to develop topics that how they could use the 3DHP in their business, in their workflows, and whatever they've got going on, because there's no way that any one of us is going to know every different workflow that comes about. So these things could include work cases, different models that already exist for floodplain management, maybe for natural resources management, threatened and endangered wildlife and fisheries, even cartography, just all kinds of things could be individual topics. And so I was planning on making an implementation of developing short tutorials that would be available online and all be standardized, and maybe either some sort of a standard blog post or story maps or something like that that people could get on and be familiar with, and have those developed by people on this team and maybe some graduate students. And if we can get those graduate students involved, that gives them ownership and experience. And, they've got new and fresh ideas as well. And then the graduate students and really anybody else could be part of a training program to where they could teach, one or two modules during a session whenever they can at some meeting or something, or they could have an all day of, several tutorials all at once or something like that. So that was my thoughts.
All right. Well, it sounds like we might want to start with the team. So I'll put a call out for folks that might want to work on this. Obviously, Suzanne, you're on the list already. We'll put out a call to see who else would be interested in working on this, and we'll come up with a plan of action. I did want to back up a bit. I just saw a comment from Jason Dunham. Jason, we were talking about integrating the data earlier. Would you like to talk about the webinar you put in the chat? Very interesting.
Yeah, sure. We've got a couple of what we call feature mapping tools for mapping where stream channels are and their flow permanence characteristics. So looking for like perennial or intermittent or ephemeral types of streams. And then we've got a second tool specifically focused on mapping where road stream crossings are. So looking at road characteristics, characteristics of stream channels, and crossings like culverts, bridges, and whatnot. So those have been used about 40,000 times here in the West, and just kind of getting the word out there to folks. These are designed to be coordinated with sort of the evolving hydroscape.
That is great. And Jason, what organization are you with?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm with USGS.
Oh, good to know. Great. Well, you're on a list too for applications. So thank you.
All right. Just signed up for more work. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, I know you don't have anything to do. I know they just, with all those extra people they hired for you. Okay. Well, in addition to training and education, there's also, as you're all aware, programs out there to assess state and federal hydrography programs and products. Both NSGIC runs a geospatial maturity assessment that includes a hydrography component, and COGO obviously runs an NSDI assessment for the federal program. Josh, do you want to, I know that you kind of took those both on in recent years. You're looking for help, or you want to talk about what you'd like to do in this capacity here?
I do think when the NSGIC GMA is released, I think it would be great to have a discussion about that. The hydro section is not graded, but we did do a ranking, and so it would be great in the future to have an opportunity to explain the data we collected and information we got. The COGO NSDI, the survey is complete. I don't think it's been released yet, but that's kind of a 2027 project. So the survey will go out this summer, and then if that's open to all users, and then we will work on the documentation of that in the fall.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, with regards to the the GMA, you're looking for an opportunity with this group to sort of discuss how the assessments and such were done and why. And with
And
regards
results.
and
Yeah.
results, correct. Yeah. And then with regards to COGO, you maybe want to enlist more folks in doing that assessment?
In filling out the survey, we already have the
Okay.
COGO team has been put together already, and Dennis, myself, Jenna, and Andrew Brenner are the COGO team.
Okay, that's great.
I can give more details
Yeah,
later.
so this is exactly why we're here. This is the kind of thing that will just make time and space for you guys to keep us informed and on how we can participate. That's great.
Oh, good. And it looks like there's some info in the chat. So maybe the final survey was released, I guess. I'm sorry, I must have missed that.
Well, I don't know. Jane's saying take the survey, so.
Okay. But
Yeah,
when,
I got the link to that from Geospatial Professional Network.
okay.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago.
Oh,
So
great.
it's out there now.
Okay. And so maybe we can promote that through this group also, Linda, to have people fill out that
Jane,
NSDI assessment.
Jane, do you know how long that is? You don't have, do you know happen to know how long that survey is open, the COGO?
I don't know. I just copied that link off their website.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's open for a while and we could use next month's meeting to maybe talk about it a little bit
Yeah.
if it's still open.
Yeah, and it's admittedly a little short, and also we appreciate that we're in a transition from NHD to 3DHP, and so it's hard to do evaluations when you know a lot of states haven't had a chance to fully embrace or get up and running towards 3DHP. So, yeah, it would be great to go over some of the questions of that if it's helpful. And people can reach out to me if they have questions about either of those.
Great. All right, thank you. And Lindsay, thank you for putting in the GMA link as well. I appreciate that. Oh, 15th of June. Okay. Well, please take the survey. So grab that link that Jane put in there. And this is the community they're talking to. So please grab that survey, take a look at it, and contribute your information. That'd be good to know. All right, and then one of the last items we had was general 3DHP planning and DCA requirements. And one of the topics that was suggested was how do we value existing data as a state contribution? So I'm sure there's a lot more. So just in general, DCA requirements. Sue, I assume there's a webinar in August for the 2027.
Yeah, that's correct. Not scheduled yet, but that's the
okay.
rough timeline that we're looking at.
So USGS has been great about providing those info webinars, and that is a place if you do have questions like this, we can bring that up. But we can also talk among ourselves because a lot of people have a lot more experience with the DCA than some others. So I think talking among ourselves would be very helpful for folks as well. Well, that is the work plan. That is the NSGIC update. So with that, I'm going to turn it over, I think, to USGS to talk about, to provide an update on where they are with the federal 3DHP program. Steve, are you the one speechifying?
I'll start and then Steve will jump on for the next two. So first I want to say, yay, I'm so glad that we finally got this going again. It was a bit of a long, hard slog. So I'm very happy to have our cooperative agreement back in place with NSGIC for 3DHP. This is just a quick status of data acquisition for 3DHP for this fiscal year. We have selected 15 DCA projects for funding. 12 of those are GPSC and 3 cooperative agreements. We did have one last application come across our door before we close the FY26 DCA on the 15th. So we're reviewing that, and we'll get back to the applicant as soon as possible. But as noted in the last bullet, the FY26 DCA is now closed. We aren't accepting any more applications, but as Linda alluded to, we are anticipating the FY27 DCA to open in August. We're still working on the timeline for that, so we'll keep this group and NSGIC updated. One other note is, two other notes, I guess, is that we have one state that is contracting directly with GPSC for 3DHP. Cy, if you're on, thank you. That's Massachusetts. He's moving forward at a pace that we can't keep up with, and we're very happy to see that buy-in from Massachusetts for 3DHP. And then we are working on 6 USGS funded projects in Alaska. We're getting very, very close to getting towards completion of contracting for Alaska. So that'll be a great milestone once we reach that, probably another year before we see all the contracts done for the state of Alaska 3DHP. And I think that's all I have. We can go next slide to Steve.
All right, so this is not as blue a map. And this is like the number one thing keeping me awake at night. This is where we are in terms of publication today. And a lot of that has to do with losing most of our production staff last fiscal year during our various staffing challenges. We've been rebuilding that capacity over the last year. April 2025, after things had gone bad, we had one person who was learning the process left. So we pulled in people from other activities, including HydroAd, including the watershed boundary data set, and we've hired at least part-time from several water science centers to try to fill that staffing gap. So we're now most of the way back to where we were. I'll point out that so this year in the Q2 release earlier, we published 5,300 square miles of new data, but we have 18,000 in work. So I mean, there's a lot of processing happening now that just wasn't happening before. Our goal for the fiscal year is still 50,000 square miles. That said, that is impacted by having 6 weeks hiatus at the beginning of the fiscal year. So actually grinding stuff through the process here has been a little challenging this past year. But making this map bluer and a lot closer to Sue's map is basically what I wake up and think about every day and some nights. Okay, let's flip that over. There we go. And then another major development, many of you some of you were HEM users, the hydrography event management tool way back in the day. Many of you were HydroAd users, working on the AGOL platform more recently. And then right now we don't have a thing to do that. That AGOL capability had to be retired for security reasons at the end of the last calendar year. And so again, told you we just pulled people off of HydroAd to make data, publish data. So I want to talk a little bit about where we are with that. First off, we're basically 3 different major requirements, use cases here. One is people out in the field collecting, samples, observing slugs or snails or fish or something. Folks like Jason need to be able to address data to the network. And so we need a new address capability. We also know there are a lot of people out there with a lot of data that has been tied to the NHD over the years. And so we need a capability to be able to convert that to a main stem address. And then now there are a few of you out there that have like very large quantities of data that need to be converted. And so we want to have a capability to do that as well. In the past, we've really tried to have like an all-encompassing tool, right? Again, the HEM or the HydroAd tools. But that's not something we're going to be able to support with the staff that we have left, and we don't really anticipate that situation getting better soon. So with that, we've really tried to shift gears on this and go to a more, admittedly, some assembly required approach here, but putting up an API that does the addressing and addressing conversion for you. You can build this into workflows of your own, whether that's, QGIS or Esri or whatever, or build it into your own workflows. We will have a basic interface that takes a CSV file, allows you to review, approve addresses, and then pull down a new CSV with the appropriate address data. And then we also have a version of the API that runs on a Linux HPC environment that does require a little more support and tweaking. But for the people that have like hundreds of thousands of addresses to migrate, that may be the path to pursue. We talked a little bit about this in the Hydro community call in April, and I guess that's a good resource available through our website, which I'll paste in here. And then we're working with a few users who expressed interest last year when we were getting close to a release to try to iron out any sort of last minute bugs in this minimum viable product and get this moved on to public consumption. And actually, I apologize. So there's one other link I should have dropped in on the previous production map, and that's a presentation that a number of folks from our Technical Operations Center did for NSGIC, I think back in February, related to what is involved in the production process to go from Sue's map to the less blue map. And that's a very good presentation that describes all the different pieces and parts in the process. One of the analogies I've been using recently to try to explain that is sort of what we get into the process is sort of like a bag of flour. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into making a bag of flour, right? Farming and tilling and milling and processing, but we still need to bake it. And this is sort of the baking process down the line to actually turn it into, bread or noodles or something. So if you want to walk through that a little bit, you'll have a little bit better sense of what we're doing in conflation and flow network derivatives and catchment generation and DEM production. And with that, I think that's everything I had to say.
Thanks, Steve. Any questions for USGS? Yes, perseverance is the word. As most of you know, this presentation will be posted to the NSGIC knowledge base. I'm grabbing these links and descriptors, and I think I'll also send out a message to the community that has just these little nuggets that everybody's throwing into the chat. We'll send that out as well. So if you're not a member of the community, I highly recommend you go join. One last call. Questions for USGS? All right. Most of you are aware is one thing that we're trying this year is putting out a call for not presentations, but call for updates from individual states rather than we used to just kind of have a general, hey, who's doing what? We thought we'd structure it a little, try structuring it. If it doesn't work, we don't work. we put out a call to, so there's going to be basically 10 states. There were 11 this time, 10 states each meeting, and we're going to invite them to present. And I want to say thank you to Alabama, Alaska, and California for responding. And with that said, let me see, is it Shelby?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead, take it
All
away.
right, I may start my video if you want to see me.
We do.
I'm Shelby Hutchison. I'm the 3DHP coordinator for the 3DHP working group. We're part of the Alabama Geographic Information Council. We're progressing with the development of a second 3DHP project in the Tuscaloosa region and targeting local interest for support. We're building local support and seeking funding partners with committed government champion and early partnership meetings are underway. Initial funding commitments serve as critical catalysts. In our experience, once initial stakeholder commits, additional investments tend to follow more readily. So we need that first investor. Leveraging each dollar contributed with significant return from additional partners is important, but as you all know, trying to explain the return on investment is challenging at this point. So Dennis, I saw you out there. The education would be very important in explaining 3DHP to stakeholders, especially. So we're actively building local support and currently seeking our first stakeholder to invest in the project. Right now we have Tuscaloosa County very interested in putting their, they're very interested first of all. So we think that other agencies will follow suit after the initial investment in the project. So how we came upon Tuscaloosa as a first or second project is we're prioritizing acquiring LiDAR data collected within the past 5 years to keep up with the current 3DHP current and to minimize accuracies from human or natural landscape changes. But I think I asked Susan if there was a rule about, having LiDAR being 5 years old or newer as a requirement, but it's not. But we're also trying to align with a 3DEP's 5-year refresh cycle and are exploring ways to synchronize collections by HUC and county boundaries. So we kind of we're trying to follow I guess you'd say a self-imposed guideline that 3DHP should use LiDAR data with it flown within the last 5 years. We do this to keep 3DHP as current and up to date as possible. And what you're talking about earlier, staying aligned with the official 3DEP 5-year refresh guidelines. So that's kind of where we're at. And you can see from the next slide, the area that we're focusing in on, the western portion of on the left map, the western portion, the 3 HUC 10s represent one of the HUC 8, and then the rest of it is another HUC 8. But we did an intersect with where LiDAR and HUCs intersect as far as came up with a model for 5-year-old age LiDAR and where the intersect would be for the HUCs, and we came up with this area, and we added additional HUC 10s to try to get more municipalities in the investment. As you can see on the right, the more municipalities involved, it covers a much larger portion of area, but also includes much more stakeholder investment. So could bring the cost down immensely if we could get a lot more stakeholder investment. But right now, the county wants to cover, if they can step in, they want to cover their whole county. So we're kind of focusing right now on scenario 2, but we're trying to reach out to those municipalities in scenario 3. But it's a tough sell. So we're trying to, again, education and showing the value of 3DHP. It's hard right now since there isn't much published, but and explaining that the importance of 3DHP is that's what we're trying to communicate to folks. So that's where we stand right now.
All right. Any questions for Shelby? Any commiseration for Shelby?
Yeah, it's nice to see everybody. I'm starting to recognize folks on the call, like Dennis and others haven't seen in a while. So it's great to see everybody on here.
All right. Well, yes, I'm certainly with you, Shelby. I'm looking at the names going, yes, we're back. And I did want to follow up with that as well. Just you guys, the extra work that both NSGIC and USGS put in to make this happen. It's pretty remarkable. So kudos to Lindsay and Sue and Steve, and I'm sure 73 other people that made this happen. All right. Next up, we have Alaska, and I don't think that Leslie's on the call. Leslie, are you on the call by any chance? Anybody from Alaska that wants to? Because USGS, just a heads up, if they're not, you're probably the best people to speak to this. So, all right, Sue, Steve, can either of you kind of fill us in on these? Sorry for
Sure. I'll
surprising
jump
you. They're your slides, so I figure.
this looks kind of familiar. Yeah, and this is actually somewhat dated. We don't have the planned FY26 projects on, which will fill in a large part of the area, both in the southeast and in the Yukon and Kuskokwim deltas. So those big yellow areas are what largely we plan to cover this fiscal year. So you can see the stats. I won't read those. I will note that USGS, particularly our previous Alaska program manager who left last year, Tracy Fuller, was working with Forest Service in Southeast Alaska, where it's a rainforest and it's very heavy, dense vegetation. So the IFSAR data that we have for Alaska 3DEP is a little bit limited in some areas in that portion. So Forest Service has been working on delineating some data from LIDAR resources in those areas. And we're still working with them to determine how, if we can bring those data into the 3DHP, it'll probably be somewhat long-term project that we need to work on, given that there's a mixed DEM and the rest of Alaska is based on the 5-meter IFSAR data. But that data, at a minimum, will be a resource for Forest Service in the state of Alaska until we can bring it into 3DHP officially. And I think Steve's not blue map. We are working to get the accepted data published as 3DHP with some dedicated work from our Utah Water Science Center folks kind of focusing on publishing Alaska data. I think that's it.
Yeah, there's one more slide she had. Hold on. A forestry project? I mean, a USF?
Yeah, this is that project I mentioned that Tracy Fuller was working on with Forest Service for them to do some delineations based on, I think they're doing, it's LIDAR, but there's also potentially some resampled IFSAR data that's being used as well. So these are the data sets that we hope at some point to be able to bring into 3DHP and or use as a reference for IFSAR-based mapping until we can get these data into the 3DHP.
All right, great. Any questions for Sue on Alaska? All right. And then our last date today is California. And Jane, I'm going to apologize in advance. I was not able to get that last slide in. So just a
Oh, the
heads
map.
up.
Okay, that's fine. If anybody wants a visual, they can contact me and I'll share it. But okay, so our California hydrography stewardship team, led by the California Department of Water Resources with some funding that we get from the state's general fund, is actively developing elevation-derived hydrography for the fiscal year 25 DCA project called the Feather River Headwaters under a cooperative agreement with California DWR. This project area is 3 Huck 8 units covering 3,604 square miles, overlapping parts of 6 counties, 3 U.S. Forest Service units, and a portion of Lassen Volcanic National Park. This is 85% funded by DWR and 15% by USGS. We selected these watersheds because they are the primary headwaters of our state water project, which provides water to nearly 2/3 of the state's population and irrigates a lot of our farmland, 750,000 acres, 750, yeah, 1,000 acres of farmland. So we did submit 2 proposals for fiscal year 26, and the one that was accepted is 5 Huck 8 units adjacent to these 3 Feather River Headwaters units, but we're still awaiting the grant information to get things moving on that. These Sierra Nevada mountain and foothill subbasins cover 4,501 square miles, extending into parts of the Sacramento River Valley. They overlap 6 counties and 4 U.S. Forest Service units, and the funding is DWR 70% and USGS 30% on that. And the LIDAR coverage for both of these projects is largely from a 2022 collection, which is QL1, but a mix of older QL2 collections around the edges. So the work is being done by our university partners. There's the California State University Northridge Center for Geospatial Science and Technology and the California State University at Chico North State Planning and Development Collective. So they have production shops, and we work under they work with us under interagency agreements, building tools and workflows that we hope to share publicly eventually. We did submit another proposal that would have covered Los Angeles County and Channel Islands, but USGS decided to wait until we've delivered on our first project before they invest in us anymore, which is, understandable. So we'll probably resubmit that one for next fiscal year. Okay, next slide. And so independent of our stewardship team, there are 2 other fiscal year 25 DCA projects that were proposed and accepted. And the work is being done under the Geospatial Product and Services contracts by NV5. One of them is the North Bay Regional Hydrography Program. The project partner Solano County took the lead on that, covering 4,092 square miles and all or parts of 7 counties. And then a little bit to the south of that is the Santa Cruz Mountain Stewardship Network Hydrography Program, covering 2,369 square miles and includes 3 complete South Bay counties. The project partner and lead on that is the San Mateo Resource Conservation District. Additionally, a small pilot study was conducted by DWR and the CSU partners last year to compare QL1 and QL2 elevation-derived hydrography features in response to statements and questions that we hear from the user community, including some folks that might be on the call today. One thing we've heard is, well, our data that we got done is better than the USGS specs because it was done with QL1 data. Can't we just resample our QL1 data to QL2? What do we lose in the, do we lose something in the process of doing that? How much better is QL1 EDH data compared to QL2? And is there a path to conflate a fully derived QL1 product to meet USGS standards? So this project was presented at the 2025 Esri User Conference last year and earlier this year at the CalGIS conference. Slides from those presentations are posted on our agency's open data site. And so you're welcome to take a look at that. We presented the findings to Sue and Steve recently and are in the process of incorporating their comments into our technical report, which we will release when it's ready. There's another independent project underway, which is not a DCA project, covering a large area of the North Coast and far northern California. The partners include the North Coast Resource Partnership and U.S. Forest Service, and they've contracted directly with NV5. So they're doing it this way probably because they need the data right away and they don't want to wait for it to have to go through the USGS process. However, as I understand it, with the data information shared with me by NV5, they are doing it to the 3DHP standards that USGS has published, and the plan is for this elevation-derived hydrography to eventually find its way into the 3DHP. Hopefully there will be a process for contributed data at some point. And then last week, our CSU partners presented some of the EDH tools that they've developed at the American Water Resources Association 2026 Geospatial Water Technology Conference. And those slides are also posted at the link I shared. And so that's all I've got for now. Happy to take questions.
Questions for Jane? I'm going to go ahead and advance to the closing slide, but catching up here. Stuart offered to provide a little update on Connecticut. So Stuart, go ahead.
Hey, I'll keep this quick. I'm kind of covering for Alfredo Herrera and the lead of our project, Diava Lambert, for Connecticut for 3DHP. But we are wrapping up LiDAR collection for the entirety of Connecticut as well. It's done, so we're getting into QA/QC for 2026, and we'll be using that in conjunction with our 2023 LiDAR collections for getting into the project that the USGS selected us for integration into the Connecticut and New England DCAs. Sorry, I can answer email. I can forward questions if there are any for Connecticut to the proper people. But happy to take any questions through email or here.
And thank you, Stuart. And as most of you are aware, that this was a regional project, and I know a lot of us putting together our DCA and worry about working across state boundaries and things like that. So Stuart and team are a good resource for that information.
Thank you.
Yeah, so real quickly, upcoming activities. We're going to start some outreach. If you're interested in this training materials outreach or the training materials, maybe collaborative, working together, please contact me directly. We'd love to get a small team moving forward on that. Reminder, June 9th is the USGS tribal notification presentation. That does require registration. We'll meet again here, June 23rd, the interest group meeting. If you have thoughts or something in particular you want to cover during that meeting, please contact me, and the state reports will be Hawaii through Maryland, so we'll reach out to them. July 14th, of course, the State Hydrography Stewards meet up at ESRI. And then July will be a USGS hydrography community call on that fourth Tuesday. And again, you need to join to get that call-in information. I introduced the characters earlier. Here are their contact information if you need to reach out to anybody. And with that said, I cannot tell you how glad I am to be back and looking forward to getting some work done. And I'll just leave it open. Anybody else have any closing comments they'd like to share?
Hey, Linda.
Phil has his hand. Sorry, he's more polite than me.
Yes, Phil.
a question for the states that not only the ones that have talked today, but are also on the call. I'm just curious. Has any state taken the initiative to designate the new 3DHP data as their state or local government authoritative data source? Because many of them are, I know in Indiana is the case, many of our regulations and policies and laws are still written back on the blue lines on the quad map. And it seems like that has to change here and might be the motivation to find funding and find support for this program if that were to happen as this data is also being developed. I'm just curious if any state's already taken those steps.
That's a good
Washington,
subject. Go
yeah,
ahead.
Washington has. We have adopted new language to replace NHD used to be the data standard from our GIO. We have moved it to 3DHP, but we had to kind of do a grandfathering clause to say you have some time to adopt because we have one small huck that's been updated. So we have not, it's supposed to, I think, really go into effect or become a demand in 2030.
It's a little late for this discussion, but understanding that, and again, USGS can correct me here. This data was not developed for policy purposes. I'd be really interested in the careful language you all are using to say this is the data you should be using, but maybe not the data you have to be using. Sue, Steve, would you like to chime in on that?
I think maybe to say it's not for policy purposes is maybe not quite right, but it is. I mean, it is not a regulatory data set.
Okay.
It certainly can be used to inform, regulatory decisions, but we really want to try to keep it away from, being a strict indicator of someone has to do something or someone doesn't have to do something.
All right. Well, I think this would be a good discussion. Thank you for bringing this up, Phil. We can see how people are, how they're implementing in-state as an authoritative data source. And then Josh, you had something else you wanted to share?
I typed it in the chat, but we are still working with the Esri ArcHydro team to develop tools to help connect your data to either elevation-derived hydro or 3DHP. We'll be rolling out our phase 2, which are the snapping tools. We hope to do that at the Esri UC, and we will be putting a lot of that information on our webpage shortly. So the first set of tools is creating linear reference networks off of EDH or 3DHP. We have a 60-page cookbook on how to do that, and then hopefully soon we'll have the snapping tools to accompany that.
I'm sorry, I can't figure out who's talking now. Go ahead, Josh. I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay. And so that's if you are able to attend the UC, please look me up. If not, I'll announce shortly those new tools. But I also posted them to the interest group. That 60-page document
Excellent.
is in the. I don't know if it's in the discussion or library, but it's in the 3DHP link or whatever we call that, the NSGIC discussion forum.
Right. And again, you all, that's for you all to talk. It's not a one-way mechanism. So I like seeing when folks are posting their information. So again, I want to thank you all for participating. I appreciate your input. And I did want to mention, after hearing all of these applications and stuff, we have pitched, it has not been accepted, but we have pitched to have a 3DHP happy hour at the NSGIC annual conference. Whether that'll be expanded beyond 3DHP, whether it'll even happen. So just a heads up, things like this, we'd love to have people sit down and play with these incredible, these great resources. So, all right, with that said, last call. Phil, your hands up again or still, or
No, sorry.
That's okay. I'm I'm getting it in. All right. Sorry to go a little over. Debating whether we need to make this an hour-and-a-half meeting if we have more than 3 states show up for presentations. But thank you all. Good to see you all, and we'll talk to you next month.
Thanks, Linda.
Thanks, Linda.